Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming. My name is David Naska. I'm a faculty member in the art program teaching ceramics and also a member of the Visiting Artists Series Committee. The Visiting Artists Series is a collaboration between the Cleve Carney Museum of Art and the programs of art, architecture, photography, and interior design. Our Artist Talk series continues this spring with presentations on March 19th, April 15th, and May 7th. As a reminder, we encourage the audience to silence phones and stay for the entire lecture. At the end of the talk, we should have time to take some questions. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing our spring artists in residence, Luka Carter and Katz Tepper. Luka and Katz will be working on a collaborative body of ceramic work in the COD studios this month. There will be a public exhibition of their work from April 7th to 11th at the project space in MAC 264D, located in the Jewelry Suite. There will be a public reception Thursday, April 10th from 3:30 to 5. Please mark it on your calendars and feel free to stop by and visit Luka and Katz in the ceramic studios in the meantime. Luka Carter is an interdisciplinary artist who lived on a boat for 3 years in Rockaway Beach, New York, a trailer in Bolinas, California, and plenty of places in between. The friends and community that he finds in each of these places has allowed for a strong, beautiful network of friendship and artistic collaboration. With a background in construction and cooking, Luka has a knack for making space for art in overlooked or interstitial spaces. His practice spans zines, furnitures, tattoos, ceramics, clothing, and installations. He received a BA from Colorado College and an MFA from the University of Georgia, and has been an artist in residence at Eureka, Chautauqua School of Art, Acre, and Anderson Ranch. Recent exhibitions include Baba Yaga Gallery in Hudson, New York, Scope Art Fair in Miami, Baltimore Print Fair, and Manitou Art Center. Katz Tepper is an artist and guest co-curator with Mo Costello for the forthcoming Beverly Buchanan exhibition and publication, Beverly's Athens, at the University of Georgia's Athenaeum. Tepper's work has been the subject of solo exhibitions at Atlanta Contemporary, White Columns, New York, Cushion Works, San Francisco, Laurel Gitlin, New York, and is screened at the Tang Museum in Sarasota Springs, the British Film Institute, and Fluentum, Berlin. Their work has been supported by the Wynne Newhouse Award, the New Jewish Cultural Fellowship, the Foundation for Contemporary Arts, and through residencies at MacDowell and the Skowhegan School of Painting and Culture. Tepper's art writing has been published in Burnaway Magazine and the 2024 Guangzhou Biennale Handbook. Tepper earned a BFA from Cooper Union 2010 and an MFA in sculpture from the Milton Avery School of Art at Bard College 2021. They are currently a writer in residence at Writerspace and have an upcoming exhibition at Prairie in Pilsen right in Chicago this summer. Thank you all, and I'm going to turn it over to our visiting artists.
Thank you, David.
Thanks, David.
All right. We are the Fools. Go ahead, Katz.
I'm Katz,
And I'm Luka.
and we're going to organize this talk by each sharing about 10 minutes, grounding in our individual practices, and then we'll take about 20 minutes to introduce our collaboration. Thanks, y'all, for being here.
I'll go ahead and kick this off. First, I'd like to share a little bit about myself and how it kind of informs my work. I am impulsive and energetic, loud and extra sometimes. I think that shows up a lot in my work. I work in a very intuitive and decisive manner. In building, there's something called starting from zero, and it is the idea that first you check the floor to make sure it's level, and then you make sure the table is level. That way, everything you are making in theory will come out perfect and exact. So I sort of do that too in my own way. This project is called Base Layer, and I sort of think of it as a gently used sketchbook, and it is my version of starting from zero. It is also a love letter to what can be done in the margins. I give these books away, and I use them for all of my own sketching and writing of thoughts down. There are no empty pages in it, so it kind of takes the pressure off of having to start from something that's blank. Your starting place is something that's a little bit weird and wonky. So I mean margins in a few different ways. One being the literal margins of the page or outside of the frame. Judith Butler talks about frames as things that can always be broken, but as soon as they are broken, they are put back together in different configurations. So I make frames all the time, and then I break them or have things falling out of them, and I think about and embrace precarity and failure in these ways. For me, margins are also cups and shirts and the objects that sit just outside that are deemed not as valuable or precious as a painting or a serious sculpture. And I really like to play with that. And I actually don't believe that. And I think in a lot of ways, they're way better. So they are also pages in the sketchbook. They're small canvases, except they are out in the world. Whereas I see a sketchbook as being something that is reserved for the sketcher. And this like more intimate thing is then brought out into the general public. So I like things that move and become a collaboration with the wearer or the user. Things that degrade over time with use and have to be worked at to be preserved. I mean, how often does a sculpture fall off a nightstand when you are reaching for it in the middle of the night? Or how often does a painting get caught on a fence and rip? These things become part of a daily ritual that are woven into the fabric of everyday life. So I just have some kind of questions that I sit with. Can attending to objects with care be a labor of self-sustenance for us as well? Can the things of our lives be our companions, our children, our comrades? What can we know or feel about our own bodies through the ways that we relate to objects? I want to propose the possibility that our relations with objects themselves might function as a means of remodeling our own often fraught bonds with the materiality that is our own lived bodies. I sometimes joke that all I'm doing in the studio is making friends, and this joke is definitely feeling more real by the day. I really try to think about function in unexpected ways. This was a grill that I made entirely out of clay for a surrealist dinner party that I did with my ceramics class. Everyone had to sort of make an object out of clay and then perform with it. So as I mentioned, or as was mentioned in my bio, I have a background in cooking, and I've worked at many different restaurants over the years, and the collective nature of working in a kitchen is something that really influences the way that I make art and orient myself in the studio and try to involve both the person that's consuming my art and the people that are making it, and kind of try to blur that line. And I really want people to be confronted with my work out in the public, stumbling into it unexpectedly. The white wall of the gallery has never done too much for me. I really like to have the work out in the wild, shall we say. This is a project that I did for my thesis work in grad school. It is a giant Gatorade fountain, and Athens, Georgia is where I first met Katz, and there's a lot of different themes that are kind of circulating through the fountain, you might say, but the sort of underlying story that's being told through of it is about this time when I lived on my boat and I, late at night, accidentally biked off of the dock and had to fish my bike out with this like giant Looney Tunes magnet. And so there's kind of this happening throughout, and from far away you don't really see it, and then as you kind of get closer, the story starts to reveal itself through different signifiers and symbols and patterns. On that note, I love translating images from different mediums. It kind of goes back to this idea of lines being blurred. I like thinking about the drawings jumping out of the page and onto the ceramics and then getting inked up and rolled into a t-shirt like a relief print. I sculpt t-shirts and I paint on ceramics. They are all interconnected and informed and also informing each other. Sgraffito, which some ceramics folks might have heard that word before or even done it, is one of my favorite techniques in ceramics. It feels much like tattooing and has the same sort of permanence on the pot. I think of all my pots like bodies. I usually start by drawing grids into the pots, and sometimes I follow them, sometimes I ignore them completely. Grids are like a bunch of frames. They are contemplative spaces, they are windows, they are contradictory. What do I mean that grids are contradictory? I mean that grids are confining and they provide structure. They are also authoritarian, and using a grid allows me to create and also break my own rules. And it also provides me a structure to work within. I really like having a certain structure that I can at least start from. And within that structure, I find creative freedom through trying to push against the structure. It's freeing and confining, much like a window, closed but open. In addition to making clothing, functional ceramic pieces, and doing design work, I also teach part-time at Colorado College, and I also teach art at a Montessori school from K through 8. And I really love teaching and involving students in different projects, which I'm really excited to do while we're here. This was from a show I had where this graphics research lab on campus and I collaborated on this like mobile live printmaking project. And we all had a very fun time making custom jumpsuit uniforms that we wore during the opening, and it was actually where I learned how to sew, which was super awesome, and that was something that one of my students was able to teach me, and so I really like thinking about spaces that can become more of an open share, an exchange of knowledge. So I look forward to collaborating with some of you while we're here. I'm gonna hand it over to Katz now.
Hello, I'm Katz. Thanks, Luka. So I'm gonna start by sharing an image from early in my life as an artist. In 2010, directly after graduating from undergrad, I was living in New York City doing performance art. I was making these hand-painted signs, and I'm sharing this image to introduce my interdisciplinary practice and also to sort of locate some through lines and persistent themes that have been in my work for over a decade, namely a kind of insistence on thinking through how language and signs get animated by the body. And I explore this across a range of forms and media. Performance itself has been a complicated site for me because my body is unstable. I'm chronically ill. So like a week after this picture was taken, I was hospitalized and had to start to rethink what performance could mean to me. I moved into my dad's garage in Florida right after this and have had a lot of interruptions into like a kind of linear practice as an artist, but within that, I'm always thinking about what does embodiment mean within my work. And it took me about 6 years to really start to make art seriously after leaving New York and being in a kind of survival mode with chronic illness. And I really see ceramics as this gateway drug back into making because of how directly it registers touch and how the history of ceramics, its use as a vessel throughout history, relates directly to the bodily and to digestion specifically as subject matter. I found I was really needing a very material practice, moving away from the verbal and the ways I had been playing with text, and finding ways to articulate ways of knowing that language had failed to describe. So this is from 2017, and this installation is called How Does the External Shape Shape the Internal Shape? The title in a lot of ways describes like the formal and subject matter concerns, how are insides shaped in relation to their environment? Are the edges between inside and outside so discrete? So I was invited to make this large wall installation that on a 12-foot by 14-foot wall, and I was thinking a lot about billboards and signage and how could I kind of merge the language of signage with the bodily, the digestive, and even the medical, including the palette, which is really forefronting this powdery beige and powdery blue, which are like the colors of doctors' offices. And here's a detail. So within the low relief sculptural language, I was really thinking about imagery related to anatomy, surgery, and honestly, the children's game Operation is a very interesting formal language to me. So this piece is ceramic, industrial felt, pigmented plaster, epoxy, and wood, and paint. And from there, I really began to explode materially, in a lot of ways, really invested in tactility as presented almost overwhelmingly. This is a piece called I Infected from 2018. I was also thinking about billboard signage. This is a giant letter I, and it's made, its infrastructure is actually toilet plungers. There's about 25 toilet plungers that are structurally supporting this low relief sculpture that sticks out of the wall about 2.5 feet. Here's the detail. So I was really thinking about materials and objects that function as artifacts of illness. In a lot of ways, thinking about the paraphernalia of the bathroom, plungers, toilet paper, other detritus of medical management. The blue is all made out of nitrile medical gloves. I was thinking about how I can repurpose these objects and treat them almost as quilting material. And my own medications end up in there, used medications, natural and industrial materials, a kind of real value system that elevates the status of detritus. But as I was saying, my work is actually quite inconsistent in its form, and I think a lot about how illness acts as an interrupter into form, which we all experienced with COVID, sort of shutting down what we knew to be everyday life, and that's a pretty familiar modality for sick people. So in 2020, I completely dematerialized my practice, and I made this 45-minute video entirely out of screen recordings in Google Docs, in a lot of ways harkening back to that first performance image that I shared. But in a lot of ways, the subject matter is still the same, but different resonances can come out as I move across different approaches through form. So while it's all text and movement, it's still in many ways about digestion and illness. This scene reads, "If this artwork will need footage, colonoscopy footage." Alongside making these videos, I met Luka in Athens, Georgia, and we started a social practice project with our friend Mo Costello, where we took a booth in a local flea market and started to make these kind of queer responses to quite a I would say a Bible Belt space in rural Georgia. And here's me and Luka playing with making some shirts and trying them on. And we were, in a lot of ways, thinking about sort of site specificity and responsiveness to scavenging materials from the flea market. This shirt that we made together says, "Excuse me, sir, mister, my eyes are down here." And we both make t-shirts, and we both continue to make shirts independently after our convergence. And for me, I'm really thinking about the shirt as site-specific to the torso, how the torso holds these major signifiers of gender and also is the container of organs. And making them at that time fully wearable, so that I was really thinking about gifting to sick and trans friends, thinking about how text and language gets written upon certain people's bodies, and the way that a shirt becomes a very intimate and personal scale. So I'm going to share now a few images from my studio now, works in progress. I've moved away from thinking of the shirts as only wearable, and I've started to really understand them as a canvas and a kind of sculptural language, where I'm coming back to surgery and thinking about deconstructing them, but the ways that they can act as a stand-in for the body. And also, as I had made these very clunky, large-scale sculptures, I found that was not a very sustainable practice. So in a lot of ways, I'm formally trying to make sense of what does it mean to make something gently. So these are made out of just tape sewn over paper. I want them to be light enough that they could maybe fly away like a kite. This is a photocopy of my symptoms journal. So in a lot of my work, I'm thinking about these different artifacts produced in illness, in survival, and trying to bring them up to a different value system. So what does it mean for what is normally considered private to maybe be exposed on, if the shirt becomes a stand-in for a body, then it's like wearing its journal on its sleeve, and perhaps the text that's recording bodily maintenance becomes something more like literature or poetry. And that's a detail where it's really trying to push the material into the place of textile. I'll just close this part out by sharing a couple video pieces in progress. This is my little Photoshop sketch of a 3-channel animation I'm working on called Transmissions. It's all made out of Xeroxes. In this scene, I'm giving top surgery to Robert Gober's 1984 Slides of a Changing Painting. And so I'm doing some work where I'm trying to respond to queer artists of previous generations and create dialogue with their work. And this scene from a piece I'm working on called Rock, Paper, Body, Cut is self-captioned, attempting to merge crypt time and deep time. That's going to come into our collaboration as we're thinking about different time scales, the biologic and the geologic merging.
All right, thank you, Katz. Now we're going to introduce our practice and kind of talk about stuff that we've been thinking about together. So first,
we're the Fools.
We are the Fools. That is our collaborative name. And we're going to just start with sharing one of our favorite artists that is a huge influence on both of us, and kind of where we're grounding Niki de Saint-Faye as our patron saint. And this is a sketch for her sort of magnum opus, which is called Tarot Garden. And she built these amazing sculptures, all based off the different major arcana of tarot. And we are really drawn to her maximalist enchantment, and we converge around it. We share an appreciation for her wildness, her imagination, as well as the devotional nature of her work, and the way in which it is imbued with her own belief system. So
here's an image of Tarot Garden, the immersive sculpture park she built in Italy, that's all made out of cement with mosaic ceramic and mirrors, and she lived inside the breast of the empress while working on the garden. Okay, so now we're going to share kind of our manifesto, which is also the artist statement that we used in our application. Maximalist transpoetics underlie our approach to sculpture and installation. The aesthetic inquiry we engage is rooted in efforts to propose new value systems, to lyrically translate our lived experience. After all, the process of self-actualizing is already a sculpture practice and has rendered us Frankensteins incarnate. Our nipples have literally been cut off our bodies, hydrated in jars of liquid on metal tables for hours, and sewn back on as decoration. Our bodies are dynamic sculptures before we ever get to the studio, but just to get to the studio, we must navigate the negative obsessions with our bodies circumscribed in public space. Through our immersive and tactile work, we delineate an alternate surround. In the realms we create, we seek to give form to the absurd joy of being deemed monsters.
Our shared visual language celebrates an ecstatic relationship to excess and porosity. Using humor, objection, play, color, and crude touch, our approach to clay embraces a negotiation with the unknown and a loss of control, leaning into the transformative alchemy from greenware to glazing to firing as an embodied translation of a body in flux. Clay registers our imprint, records our experience, merging with material and becoming less singular and less human. Through an ethos that embraces improvisation, we elevate alternative forms of knowledge. In this amalgamation of methods and forms, we make the world anew. So Katz and I are in a long-distance collaboration. I'm in New York, and Katz lives in Chicago. And as we were getting closer to being able to come together in the physical realm, we wanted to work towards thinking about our collaboration in a way that felt natural and spontaneous and could be intertwined into our everyday lives and media. So we're gonna kind of do something on the more vulnerable side and share with you the beginnings of our ideation stage. We kind of just got here a few days ago, so we haven't quite had a chance to show you all the work that we've made while we're here. So we wanted to kind of share with you the before, and so that while you're here, you can kind of follow along on our journey with us. So you'll see through these screenshots that we're going to share how our texts move from our own process shots to artworks that we're appreciating, to things we're noticing in our built environment, and also the way we're sort of reflecting on why we're excited by these different sources.
And also through this text exchange, we're really locating our practice and our coming together in the historical present, which we identify as crisis conditions. Climate catastrophe, genocide, and fascism are the backdrop. Ours and so many communities' stories are being actively written out right now. We're thinking about what does it mean to leave a record in which we can write our stories back in, and really leaning into enchantment, excess, pleasure, play, and friendship as modalities for imagining something beyond what we've got. We're going to start by reading through our text messages, and we're going to start by showing how we came to the name The Fools, drawn from Nikki de St. Faye's tarot deck. So I texted Luka, I just pulled this card. I'm obsessed with the way the shirt is rendered. This is like what I try and mostly fail to do, make a torso feel like it's made out of divergent roads. Here's a thought. Is our collaborative name The Fools?
The Fool's number is 0, no number. But for me, 0 is a number. The Fool in the tarot deck is as strong as all the other cards put together. Why? Because he represents man on his spiritual quest. Not knowing where he is going, the Fool is ready to discover. He is the hero of the fairy tales who appears dim-witted, but is able to find the treasure where others have failed. The Fool has a few possessions. He travels light.
Under Trump 2.0, we are zeros, non-persons. We, quote, appear dim-witted, deviant, lacking moral character, etc., all official government language used in the last few months to describe trans people. But we find the treasures where others have failed. And we are, quote, ready to discover. We embrace change. We embrace the unknown. I'm also interested in traveling lightly. That's been coming to me in visions. Be light enough to fly away. How do we do that with ceramic? I'm thinking about negative space, about this fool's torso, which is mostly air and some lines. This feels like a fun formal imitation, too. To start us off, I'm sharing some images of my various recent attempts to merge with rocks. Here's a drawing I'm working on this morning, colored pencil on Xerox. I got a gnarly blister putting my index finger directly on a sizzling pan of fried honey I was eager to taste. The blister felt related to the rocks I'm ritually collecting from the shore of Lake Michigan. I've been thinking a lot about Paul Tech and artists who work at the space of thresholds. Thresholds between life and death, male and female, body and rock come to mind. Rocks have been a source of comfort because they are billions, millions, or thousands of years old, and that's epic and puts the unlivable present in perspective of deep time. Most rocks have seen the rise and fall of all empires, and even these were insignificant to them. And that's my drawing in progress, and this is Paul Tech's untitled Hand with Ring from the series Technological Reliquaries, 1967. I'm very excited about what ceramics can do to get me and us closer to merging with the rocks. I feel very drawn to making figurative sculptures. I've never made a sculpture for a pedestal. This would actually be so fun, to riff off classical sculpture for the present and the future. As you know, I'm obsessed with this torso bust at the Art Institute. I can imagine making a series of torso busts and ornamenting them through pressing found objects in, doing additive stuff, crazy glazing, etc. Transing them, but also nodding to the ways this thing already feels way gay, right? Okay, one last thing. I wonder about making ceramic recreations, low relief paintings maybe, of photos where scale is totally distorted. And this is more views of this Art Institute bust. And this is Paul Tech, The Tomb, 1967, with my blister and medication. Here's the finished drawing I started yesterday. Its title is, Won't You Join Me and My Blister on Our Journey to Merge with Rocks, LOL.
Ha ha ha. I am excited to speak the language that our hands make when they make work together. Being around children recently has been healing. It brings me back to an essence of myself. Making art with them just for the sake of making something is what I am really leaning into and letting rub off on me. I love making my more functional stuff to a degree, but I definitely am feeling the urge to get freaky with it/you in the studio and not feel so much in survival mode, where will I put this mode. Recently, I've been like, should I become a firefighter or something more useful? But then my friend Sky, who is a fighter, laughed and said, art is the most useful thing. It brings peace. When you were talking about rocks, I was thinking about the first ceramics I ever made. They were pretty much rocks, dense and rugged. I saw this ceramic artist, Ruby Neri's studio and house burned in LA. Her giant figurative pieces, airbrushed with neon colors, pieces she thought were finished, took an unexpected additional firing. Lots of them broken and cracked, maybe from the heat, maybe from debris falling on them and crushing them. It's the only thing on the property that even has the vaguest semblance of before. Some children's art inspo that we collect. Kiwi performed yesterday for the closing of Shaboom, Everything Must Go. It's this collective of 3 queer artists, and they do performance and wacky sculptural stuff. This iteration was a courtroom of sorts. It made me excited to collaborate and also resurface my desire to do more performance work. I feel like your rock ritual is really getting at that too. I think I often do perform with my work, or the performance is implied, like the automated athlete or even the grill. Shaboom. Circles are always on my mind, of course. Today, we made birthday cakes with dinosaur eggs inside. I keep thinking about your drawing, the whiteboard one, and also about queering function, tubes, pipes, plumbing, organs, vessels, passageways, like a giant Grey's Anatomy-style model of an inside of a trans body where all the functions and organs are super wild and abstract and nonlinear, and the body subsists on some sort of weird slime juice. Watching Dr. Show in the studio while I perform surgery on these cups, adding handles, phalloplasty.
Oh my God, as a highly medicalized person who loves to consume medical dramas, especially when I'm bedridden, I also deeply identify as a surgeon and see sculpture and collage as surgery practices. And that's the whiteboard drawing that Luka was referring to. That's something I made after a medical procedure. The spot on the beach is where we hung out this summer. The earth is trans, always shifting. This is geology underfoot in Illinois, and detailing the deep, deep time of this part of the earth. Bless this mess as the snow gives over to slush. Erosion is hope. I want to make things that go through this many processes, that feel on the edge of the next process, inevitability of change as formal pursuit. Also, I scanned my face at 6 a.m., merge attempts, trying to recreate the feeling from a dream of my face coming out of a sidewalk covered in ice.
I too have been deeply vibing with the shape-shifting of the snow and ice. Our house gets these insane icicles on it. I think clay takes on similar metamorphic qualities to snow, especially in its unfired form. Back to the Shaboom show. I appreciated the chaos of the show. I think about chaos a lot with both of us, although I think we approach it in a different way than they do. Saw this amazing, super tactile mural at the high school I went to play pickleball yesterday. It was sandwiched in between the metal detector to enter, the band kids whirling about, and the NYPD training center readiness section of the high school. Some stuff from a quick walk around yesterday. We both love to just go to museums and walk around and find things from the past that really resonate with things that we're thinking about or forms that we're interested in.
And especially the kind of various ways ceramic has been used throughout history as functional, but also as game material for making games. Thinking about making a tablescape, some shots from the journey. I want to make Trump Tower crumbling.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, I was just looking at these Simone Fatale sculptures. Glaze goals, all Lake Michigan. On the left is my rock collection from this winter.
That's a very small part of it, by the way.
On the right are rocks from Lake Michigan under a black light where the minerals are. literally glowing in the dark. Finding lots of breathtaking blues as the ice shelf melts off the shore. It's uncovering these different layers. Maybe we can learn from something there. So this takes us to the present. We came earlier this week for our first studio day, and really we're just starting to loosen up and orient ourselves and start to play with material. And we are excited to see how what has been a long-distance text message ideation process can now translate our curiosities and our intuition as we actually get to be working here in the studios. And we're excited to spend time with all of you, hopefully, in the studios, and we're also going to open our show in the project space on Thursday, April 10th from 3 to 5.
And yeah, I think that's it for now. We'll open the floor to questions. Oh. Do you want to pass a mic or something? Cool.
Thank you so much, and I'm even more excited to have you guys around in the studio for the next coming weeks. Do we have any questions?
Also, I know it can be daunting to ask a question amongst a large group of people. We're both super approachable. If you happen to see us around campus and would like to ask us a question in a more intimate setting, that is totally welcome. Or just come and introduce yourself. We'd love to learn more about you all.
Cool, and just days that both Luka and Katz are definitely going to be around Tuesday and Friday in Mac 166, the ceramic studio.
Do you start with materials or ideas or either or both?
Do you want to answer? I can answer it too.
Let's both answer.
Okay,
You start.
I'll start. I think that materials help me figure out my ideas in a lot of ways. And I think clay, at least when I'm working with clay, there's so much unpredictability to clay. And when I first started working with clay, I had this very clear idea of like what the thing I wanted to make was going to end up looking like, and it never ended up looking like that. And so I think I started to let go of those expectations and really kind of like allow the clay to take me on the journey. And I think that through the like very physical process of like working materially helps me kind of figure out my ideas through that. So I would say it's a little bit of both. It's a push and pull.
Yeah, I'm going to shout out a mentor, Pam Lynn's. Something that stuck with me since undergrad was an idea is only ever as good as an idea. So it's kind of another way of saying what Luka just said, which is that I find often that I might have a kind of a kind of vision for something that completely falls apart as soon as I actually start trying to make the thing. I very much believe in learning through the making, and the thing reveals itself to you, but I do think that we both are constantly generating questions to bring to the thing, so I think questions as a form of ideation is a good place where I like to start, but that it will be always a wrestling with the actual process of the making across any material.
Hi, I have a question about it was one of the last slides you showed. It was a brown, looked like a clay kind of sculpture.
This?
Yeah. Yeah, do you have a vision for that, like specifically, or a point you're really trying to get across with that one?
Yeah, so I gave us an assignment the first day we were here, which was to make 10 small sculptures and try to use as many different techniques as possible. It's an assignment I give to my students when they first start working in clay, and I think I personally thrive off of assignments, and I think once you're out of school, it can be really hard to like figure out how to ground your studio practice when you don't have these deadlines that are kind of imposed on you. And so this was a sculpture that Katz started. Oh yeah, and we were also passing them back and forth. So we would work on one and then pass it and then back and forth. And this is one that Katz started, and maybe
Sure,
you
yeah,
can
yeah.
go ahead and...
My like inner logic, right? I think these rules can also be called internal logics for a thing. Formal constraints was I had two little sculptures I was working on at once. One I was removing from, and one I was adding to. So these were all being removed from another sculpture, and my formal limitation was that everything had to be made by pinching what was being removed from the other one and putting another color clay to wedge between that pinch. I think that for me, and I think this is shared in our collaborative practice, we're very interested in the ways clay registers action and touch, and the different ways you can kind of leave a trail of traces of decision making that are often very much about like what your hand did. So in this sense, these polka dots become registers of a process.
And a pattern as well.
Yeah.
A pattern doesn't necessarily have to be decorative. It's something that can be part of the ways in which you're building something.
True, and I think pattern and rhythm are actually really important threads that appear in both of our works, and the ways that these might even have something to do with like incantation, the way repetition and pattern might have something even to do with like prayer.
So you mentioned before that you actually learned how to sew with a class when you were working on a project, and one of your like first collaborations comes from working in a shop and doing t-shirts. Can we expect to see some of that in this upcoming collaboration, something with fibers or maybe layering?
Never say never. I think that it's definitely possible. We've kind of, as we've started to create the sculptures, we have been thinking about things such as how we want it to be displayed and how we want them to be organized. And I think that perhaps fiber could come into something in that sense. We're really excited to both be somewhere where we do have access to ceramic facilities. And I oftentimes do focus more on my textile practice. I move around a lot. I do residencies here and there. And there have been times within my artistic practice where I don't have access to ceramic facilities, and the great thing about like a textiles practice is like all you really need, you don't even need a sewing machine. I need a sewing machine, but you know, it's a lot less equipment that you really need to make something. So I like to really think about setting myself up to make things under any condition that I might be in that time.
I would echo that. Ceramics is such you really do need very specific facilities. It's very hard to sustain a ceramics practice when you're not in school, unless you have a kind of institutional support. So we're definitely going to be very focused on that because it's also a very time-consuming process, and our 6 weeks is very short in ceramics time because of all the different stages that you have to go through. So I'm going to say we're most likely going to give you a ceramics heavy final result, but also never say never.
We definitely love a chef's whim, so, you know.
True.
So looking at these sculptures specifically, you guys have a lot of color variation in your clay, which is really cool. Is there any plan to add any extra like texture or color variation with glaze?
Yeah, we're going to be doing a lot of glaze experimentation. So going back to this slide where I'm honestly very excited to think about the ways we can play with different minerals in the glaze shop to try to recreate or gesture towards some kind of homage to these incredible colors that are coming out of the earth.
We both have a very maximalist aesthetic, so I would say that at every single stage, even in the ideation stage, there's just ideas being thrown at each other, and then we throw clay at each other, and then we like start messing it up, and like, you know, we have this very like kind of, we do ask for consent sometimes, but I think there is implied consent when we're working together of like, if I were to just take the sculpture and like throw it against the wall, that would be kind of like there's not really much that's like off limits. And
Or
I think,
precious.
or
Yeah.
precious. And I think for me, like every stage, there's so many steps to like ceramics and so many different things you can do to it, not to mention the collaboration you're having with the kiln as well. And so I personally try to do something weird at every stage, or different at every stage.
I think we're both really interested in the ways that the ceramic process carries history across all these different stages of transmutation. And again, kind of reading a trans like embodiment into that material collaboration, especially the ways that the clay becomes like, out of our control. So thinking about chaos as a useful like thing that we embrace in the process, and also just about the malleability, and I'm going to use a word that you used in your first 10 minutes, like precarity. There's ways that we lean into what we can't control in the process. We also will edit. So part of being maximalist means like you make a lot and then you remove, then you kind of narrow it down, which is, just not everyone works that way, but we both understand that that's part of our process.
So I had a question, thinking of the images from Paul Tech and the moment in the late 70s and 80s and 90s when artists were responding to AIDS in the face of like Reagan administration and policies that were considered deeply harmful to queer communities, and what sort of resonances you are feeling and thinking about and making about with the Trump administration.
Yeah, thanks for that question. So I've been spending a lot of time like revisiting artists working in response to the AIDS epidemic. Paul Tech and Robert Gober are two artists specifically that I've cited in some of these slides. And I think that there's a lot of ways that in crisis, it's important to turn to the archive and to models of survival and resistance that from our ancestors in different ways. And I think that there are ways to recycle or respond to the work in the present from the specifics and the particularities of our positionalities and of the moment. So I think that Paul Tech and Robert Gober were both cis white gay men making work in response to the AIDS epidemic and the ways that this was fueled by government neglect and very outright bigotry. I think that coming at it from a place that's in 2025, is that the year we are? Yeah. In a trans embodiment, in a disabled or chronically ill embodiment, it's a kind of dialoguing with their model that's also trying to bring our own subjectivities and the specifics of our time and place into that kind of union and dialogue. Do you have anything to add to that?
No.
Yeah, I think I would just maybe reiterate that this is a time that I identify as crisis, and part of why we are leaning into a kind of relationship to play is also to resist the ways that fear is being, we don't want to let them win by making us feel shut down and afraid. If that, we're thinking about futurity and imagination to imagine something otherwise. That's Paul Tech too.
What are your pronouns, if you have any?
I use he, him pronouns. Great question.
I use they and he. Thank you.
Also, thank you everyone so far for these generous questions and for sitting with us for this hour.
I see some more hands. I'm going to land on another fun slide.
I see a question down there I want to get to, but do you mind if I come through? Thank you.
So since the two of you are collaborating together and proclaim maximalists, right?
Yes.
And the underlying theme of everything's always we're all in transformation, all of us.
Yes, we are.
How do you determine when your piece is finished?
Such a good question.
Well, sometimes time.
True.
A lot of times, with clay at least, like materially, let's say you are working on something in greenware and then you wrap it up and leave for 2 days and then come back and then it's kind of dried out. Sometimes it's like the clay tells you when it's time to move on to the next step. I think also like my plan is to collaborate with Katz until I'm dead, so I think that like this is just like one collaboration amongst many that will happen, and we've already been talking about like this is a starting point for something, but we plan to kind of like get together this summer and keep working on stuff and like also continue our like texting conversation as well and kind of move through that as we move through our individual practices. And like, you know, Katz is a huge influence on me in my individual practice, and it gets to a point sometimes where it's kind of hard to tell which part is part of the collaboration and which part is just kind of part of our experience as artists.
True. I would say we have pretty porous boundaries around like individuation, and also though I think that the question of how to know when something's finished, I would say we both are like quite painterly in our trying to listen to the thing and hear what, is it underworked, is it overworked? Again, being maximalists, sometimes you overwork and then you have to remove. But I would say that the question of when is the thing finished, sometimes you do have the kind of, the deadline becomes a really helpful structure when your like internal instincts are not destination oriented maybe. Yeah.
Definitely. I would also say that bringing in some outside help can be really helpful. So
True.
Studio visits, or, you know, I'll send a picture to like my partner or a friend and they know me really well and can kind of stop me before it's too late, or just be like, you need to move on, like come back to this later. A lot of it is like a revisiting as well, especially with ceramics. You have to wait for things to dry. You have to wait for it to go through the kiln. I'm usually working in the round, you could say, and like have multiple pieces that I'm working on that are at different stages. And when I feel stuck, I just move on to something else and come back to it and like keep that kind of circulating.
Totally, and yeah, I think that maybe a word we didn't include is exploratory. So the way that the first question, like, do you start with an idea, like yes and then it becomes a process of exploration and intuition and a kind of listening to what the thing is asking of you, always very much in process.
I noticed a lot in your art you have underlying themes of like merging and rocks, of course. I see that a lot. Where do you find these themes?
Where do we find the themes? Was that what, okay.
I mean, a lot of things are very much about pulling from our environments, whether that be our physical environments or our emotional environments. And a lot of times it can be from something very seemingly mundane that happens to me. Maybe I'm like always having these very strange encounters with people on the street. I'm like a very outgoing person, so I feel like I'm always like getting stuck in these like really wild situations. And I'm also like a yes person. So oftentimes I think that both of our lives, we use humor a lot in a way to kind of talk about a host of different emotions that are like happening through us or to us or with us. And so I think like that's partially it. And then, I mean, but my influences and themes are so all over the place. I get a lot of ideas when I'm exercising. I get a lot of ideas when I'm cooking. Like it's really, I don't necessarily separate my thematic inquiry from my everyday. And I think that like as artists, we're kind of always working and thinking about things.
I would add to that, like just being receptive to where interesting information might come from, which also includes study and spending a lot of time looking at artists that have moved us, at the practices of artists that have moved us. Sometimes at practices of artists that something feels like incongruent, and trying to identify what is it that's missing from this that maybe I want to try, or we want to try to respond to. So I think that it is a kind of multifaceted process of both going on a walk and really, our slideshow showed that we're like both taking pictures as we're, walking down the sidewalk, looking at the way form exists in our everyday lives, in our everyday environment, and also, hitting the library, a lot of different kinds of modes of receptivity.
I would also say too, like, being open to change, and we're all just still learning so much, and the world is changing around us and with us and against us and for us, and you never quite know what will be next. And so I do a lot of reflection and thinking about the things that I believed 10 years ago versus now, and I think there's always going to be like a running line or multiple running lines through your work, because it's part of who you are. But I think oftentimes there's this sort of like, there's many different ways to approach thinking about themes in your work. Often some people are more of like this kind of object lesson and like take a more literal approach to like the work that they're making and what the theme is of that. And I think that is one direction you can take the work in. I think we kind of tried to swirl that up into like a giant ball and also leave it open-ended enough so that the person who's viewing the work can decide what the work makes them feel or what they think the work is about. And I think that's like an important part, like the emotional quality of the work and the ways in which people are looking at it and responding to it. And, I also, am fine if someone looks at my thing and is like, whoa, that looks great, that looks cool. Like, and if that's fine with me. I don't necessarily need, this is what is like coming out of me, but I don't necessarily need you to know that.
Yeah, maybe not over-determining it, not over-determining what it will be in the world once you make it. It no longer belongs to you. But I do think that kind of impregnating it, so to speak, with a kind of generous amount of like personal investment is, I think, one of the ways that an artwork can kind of have a like animacy to it. How did we start to think about merging with the rocks? It was really personal. Like, I carry rocks in my pockets now because I'm basically stimming with them. Like I said, I feel that we're in a crisis. There's a lot of scary information coming in every day, so nerding out about geology has been like just a very personal way that I'm coping. And I think that when you imbue a kind of urgency, a deep like personal investment in the thing, it ends up getting to maybe translate into an audience, and some morsel of that like personal investment. In a lot of ways, going back to Nikki de Saint-Faye, like her belief system was so strong and apparent in her work. So how can we kind of build our own belief system and believe in it so strongly that it like becomes part of the things we make?
Cool. I think that is it for time for questions right now. Thank you all so much. And if people have more questions, Tuesday, Friday, in the ceramic studio, come and visit. So thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you.